Welcome to the Westminster Effects Doxology Podcast, where we exist for the glory of God and the tone of his people. I'm Cody Fields, president of Westminster Effects. Go buy stuff for your guitar at westminstereffects.com. Join the discussion in the Westminster Effects Doxology Podcast Lounge on Facebook, and make sure you subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, drop us a comment below and ring the bell to make sure you get notified of whenever we drop these. I'm joined in person by...
Hey everybody, Bradley Cox, pastor at Resurrection Church in Greer, South Carolina, and this is our third podcast.
This is our third in a row. I can't even talk right at this point, but you were just happy that you didn't have to do the intro this time.
That's right. That's right. You and I are doing some podcasts on the Resurrection Church podcast.
Yep.
And I have to lead those as opposed to just sit here and let you ask me questions
right.
and I respond.
Right.
So I'm glad that you're leading this.
Right.
one.
So we're basically alternating at the moment on that feed between God's sovereignty and salvation / Calvinism, and then like how we process news, politics, culture war type of stuff, how we think about the election. That's been a project of mine for years and years.
It's a really good conversation too.
Yeah, I think it's been productive. I've already gotten, after one episode dropping, we're dropping them on Wednesdays. Mm-hmm. I've already gotten several comments about how people have benefited from them. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, and we get comments about how this benefits people all the time too, and it's always kind of mind-blowing to know where those people are in the world. So, speaking of people all over the world, professional transition. Let's go.
That's amazing.
And completely unplanned. We'll just chalk it up to Providence. We, this Sunday, did a little bit of a missions emphasis. Mm-hmm. And particularly, we had, like in terms of our discussion, I want to have that particular missionary on next summer when she comes home.
Oh, it'd be so good.
Like, oh man, Chris and I got lunch with Mary Ellen, and her story is just incredible.
It really is.
And oh man, so you'll just have to wait like a year.
Shout out to Mary Ellen if she's listening.
Absolutely,
love her.
And but we also sent a team to Mexico. Was it Linares, Mexico?
Linares, Mexico.
With our friends Back to Back Ministries. Mm-hmm. Jeff Coppins is our contact with them.
We should get him on sometime.
We should. That would be fun. That'd be a lot of fun.
If we could get him talking about orphans, vulnerable children, what Back to Back's doing, yeah.
And so Back to Back is doing some really good work. Yeah. And it feels like if you're a Christian in America, you have either gone on a short-term missions trip, or you've been pressured to go on a missions trip.
Or you've given money to someone else to go.
Or you've given money for someone else to go. Mm-hmm. So what gives? Why do we do this whole short-term missions thing?
It's a really good question, and I think my why has evolved over the years. Like I think, like most people who have gone on one or more short-term missions trips early on, I mean, I thought, well, we're going to take the kingdom to some other part of the world that doesn't have it, right?
Turns out it was already there.
Yeah, we're bringing Jesus with us because we are, you know, and I don't know if that's some of the American hubris that seeps into my thinking, has seeped into my thinking at times. But the more trips I have gone on, the more I've realized this is really not about, especially with short-term trips, us bringing something as much as it's about us experiencing the redemptive work of God, the kingdom advancement that's going on in different parts of the world, and just fundamentally thinking of it as getting to participate with Jesus in a different place, a different culture, in a different context, in what he's doing, in whatever way that opportunity opens up for us.
And a lot of times we kind of revert to, how am I going to get X amount of people saved on this trip? But with our back-to-back trips, a lot of that is just helping them do stuff that needs to be done.
Exactly. And not that, I think there are some short-term trips where the opportunity to proclaim the gospel to those who haven't heard is maybe more prevalent than others.
Right.
With back-to-back, you know, they are in all their locations. They have, you know, a 24/7 kind of operation where they're really focused on discipling children, equipping children's homes that they partner with, and also discipling and equipping families to keep children in the home. as opposed to them getting dropped off at a children's home.
Right.
So it's much more of a long game with back-to-back.
Right.
And when we go, it's not as much about evangelism as it is about partnering with them in what they're already involved in people's lives and families, parents and children. Yes, discipling, talking about the gospel, and also letting that spill over into some very practical things with regard to parenting, with regard to their education, physical development, other things like that.
Which I really appreciate that approach, because like we just talked about on the podcast that we were recording about politics, culture war, and all that, Jesus is Lord of everything.
Absolutely.
And culture is your theology coming out in your life.
Yep.
What you worship coming out in your life. And so we American Christians often treat the gospel as, the way you put it is like punching your heaven ticket, keep your nose clean, go to heaven when I die. But no, Jesus informs everything about your life. Yep. And that's what back-to-back, maybe they don't use the same language that I would or something like that, but it's informing how they live their lives.
So what I love about back-to-back is they do not merely make humanitarian type efforts.
Yep.
You know, for example, I think it was 2017 was my first trip with back-to-back and Jeff Coppins, and we went to Haiti.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was blown away by was the amount of humanitarian aid that was flowing into that country.
It's incredible.
At the time.
Yeah.
Just in that little week that I was there.
Yep.
We were on the plane going and coming with at least 3 or 4 other missions teams.
Yep.
And then riding around in Haiti and seeing the evidence of different organizations and the humanitarian effort that's being made in terms of building homes, food, other things like that. And yet the country is still in disarray.
Yep.
But what I love about back-to-back is they really do see themselves as participating with Jesus in a long game of building relationships with people who are either overseeing a children's home, have a foster care situation going on, and they're partnering with those people, building relationships, bringing the gospel, as well as humanitarian type aid. And I think that's really, really huge.
It's almost like, what's that who made the hierarchy of needs pyramid? You know what I'm talking about, though, of you got your shelter and that kind of stuff, and you build to more luxurious things eventually. It almost seems like some of the secular efforts in those are, all right, if we can get them a house, they'll be okay, and then they can build from there.
Right.
But what back-to-back recognizes is, no, if you don't have Jesus as Lord, as your foundation, the whole thing's going to fall apart anyway. Absolutely.
Absolutely. You know, there is a perspective on which you could look at a place like Haiti, and they're in much worse condition now than they were in 2017 when I was there. In fact, I don't even think that back-to-back can send missionaries from America there anymore.
When your most prominent person there goes by barbecue, it's probably having a bad time.
Yeah, but when you look at a place like that, I remember asking Jeff while we were there. I looked at the coastline that we were near, and if you took all the trash and garbage that had been dumped on the beach away, it would be one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen.
Right.
And I asked Jeff, I said, why don't some wealthy people from somewhere in the world come in and buy up all this coastline, clean it up, build resorts that people would come to, and build a tourism or economy based on tourism, much like places like Jamaica and other places have done, and it could turn this around. And he's like, well, the government's so corrupt.
Yep.
You can't buy property and trust that it's going to be safe.
Right.
And so that could be incredibly discouraging and despairing for people that might want to go there and provide help. But if you realize that, the gospel breaks in and changes people's lives at a personal level from the inside out, that's what I see back to back doing. You know, they're not trying to fix all of Haiti's problems culturally or economically. They're investing in people that the Lord's opened the door for them to invest in.
Right. And like what we see from the Great Commission on is basically Christianity going viral through the world. Is, you know, you get these people saved and discipled, and then they spread it. And then those people spread it, and it just keeps going. And so if you want to affect a culture, get people saved and discipled.
So when it comes to short-term missions trips, here's how I see this benefiting our local church, is that it allows us to partner with people who are in these places long-term. It allows us, you know, gives us a tangible sense of what's going on, and what they're involved in, what they're doing, how the gospel's advancing, and thus it fuels and motivates our desire to partner with them in prayer and financially. It also gives people in our church an opportunity to get outside of their little bubbles and experience life in a different culture. That was a lot of what the testimonies that were given on Sunday were about, was that, you know, from our short-term trip, is that it allowed people to experience a different culture. It allowed people to see Jesus moving in the lives of people who live very different lives than we do. And I think it helps frame a healthy perspective on the universal church, the global church, and that's advancing around the world. So I think there's a discipleship benefit to short-term missions for those who go, as much as there's a benefit to aid and support those who are already there on the ground, advancing the gospel.
It really is a big picture kind of thing, right? When I exhibited at the G3 conference, I think it was 2017 or 18, setup day was during the Spanish version of the conference. And, you know, any good theology conference, you're going to sing. And so they have it actually being piped into an overflow section that we could hear. And Kristen was helping me set up. And they start singing Santo, Santo, Santo. And all of a sudden I hear, and Kristen had teared up, like, just with that realization.
It's a lot for her to tear up, too.
Right. It's
beautiful.
Just that realization of, oh yeah, we're going to hang out with them in eternity, right? And they speak a different language than we do. Like, same with Haiti, same with Mexico, same with wherever we go. That's a foreign country, or even sometimes in our own country. But it's the kingdom is advancing. Yeah,
every tribe, tongue, and nation. It's a beautiful thing to witness, and I think, you know, I said this on Sunday our the girl that you mentioned, Mary Ellen, who she's a part of our church family and moved 3 years ago to Guinea in Africa to serve as she's basically a homeschool teacher for the families of the missionaries who have built a pediatric center there in Guinea, medical missions. And I said this, you know, it's a miracle when God moves on the heart of a person, regardless of where they grew up and they live, where they would call home.
Right.
When God moves on the heart of a person to move to a different place, to a different land, a different culture, a different language, in order to participate with Jesus in his kingdom agenda there, that's a beautiful, wonderful, miraculous thing. And I think, for lack of a better term, exhibiting that, either through taking a group of people on a short-term trip or letting them hear from someone who has moved somewhere long-term, I think that could be a means by which God calls more people to do the same.
Yes.
And calls more people to support those who are called to go. Because not everybody's called to uproot from their homeland and move to a different place.
Right. That's one of the pitfalls of some of the we'll just say crazy love types.
Right.
Like Francis Chan, David Platt,
Sure.
where the way it comes across, I'm not accusing them of this, but the way it comes across sometimes is if you're not willing to do this, then you're not a good Christian.
Right.
And we don't believe that at all.
Not at all. I think, again, I talk about this all the time. I think from a missional standpoint, every Christian should think of themselves as having the opportunity to participate with Jesus in his ongoing kingdom work.
Right.
And that could be across the street. It could be in your own home. It could be at work or at school, or it could be in some other part of the world.
Right.
It could be in a coffee shop in a different state or city while you're on vacation.
Right.
And if you just think that way, that Jesus is doing stuff and he invites us to get in on what he's doing wherever we are, then I think there shouldn't be any guilting people into doing something that maybe from a certain perspective is considered extreme or even pious. To hey, let's leave Southern California and move to the Philippines because that's more spiritual.
Right.
I think that's the whole point of 1 Corinthians.
There's a conflation we often have of church work and kingdom work. They're not necessarily the same thing.
No.
Because the kingdom and the church are different things. The church is the gathered people of God, and the kingdom is God's rule extended into the world. And so Michael Horton makes a great point in his book, Ordinary, which was his response to Platt's Radical. Kingdom work can be changing diapers at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
Kingdom work can be literally anything the Christian does.
Exactly.
And so I think it's, when short-term trips are done healthily, you're reminded that, yes, I am working for the kingdom, even if I have to sit in a cubicle from 9 to 5.
Exactly.
That's no less kingdom than going to Mexico or Haiti.
And I again, not just trying to be a back-to-back evangelist, but one of the things that back-to-back does.
But to be a back-to-back evangelist.
One of the things they do so well, which, of all the missions trips I've been on, I think back-to-back does this the best, is they coach, disciple, if you will, those who are there short-term to think well about what they're experiencing.
Right.
They're not there to try to get you on some spiritual high.
Yes.
That you fly back across the pond, so to speak, and you hit a low. They really do aim you at coming back to your ordinary with a bit of a different perspective, so that if you are changing diapers at 2 a.m, or you're working in a cubicle from 9 to 5, or you're trying to get to class on time, you are doing all things for the glory of God. Right. And not, and this is one of the things that Mary and I got to sit down with Mary Ellen last Friday for several hours, and we talked a lot about how the comforts in this part of the world could lull us to sleep in that regard.
Yep.
And I don't think the answer is to just throw all of our comforts in the trash and move to another part of the world, as much as it is to seek first the kingdom. And seek to participate with Jesus in that kingdom work.
Whereas the unhealthy approach, and this is all theologically informed, like this all comes out of your doctrine. Like you talked about, it's not just to get a high and then you get a low and then you have to chase another high. So some people are tempted to, I'll put it that way, whether it's short-term trips or worship nights or youth retreats, men's events, whatever, they're tempted to think, well, now that we're doing something different, God can really get hold of someone there, as opposed to trusting in the ordinary means of grace on the Lord's Day, where God has promised to show up and feed his people, right? You see what I'm saying there?
Totally. And I mean, we on the last episode, you asked me, we were talking about marriage, like what's something that, I forget how you phrased it, but like it's some paradigm that's really changed for you in 25 years of marriage. And what I said was, it's learning to have joy in the normal, ordinary routine. And I think, I think the church and its ordinary means is meant to equip people to participate with Jesus in his ongoing agenda in their ordinary routines and life rhythms and such. So I think that's, dare we say, the normative Christian experience. And then there are those that are called to literally uproot and move to a different place. But what's so interesting is how Mary Ellen, she articulated this on Sunday, and she talked to Mary and I about it on Friday before Sunday. She thought for so long, while she was waiting for her opportunity to go on the mission field, that if she could be on the mission field, that she would reach this level of soul satisfaction that she would never have here.
Right.
And she said what she discovered is that actually getting onto the mission field is not soul satisfying.
Yep.
The only thing that's soul satisfying is to find our satisfaction in dependence on Jesus, wherever we are. Because you know what? Even though the normal routine while she's here in the States might look different than it does in Guinea, she still has a normal routine in Guinea. Every missionary has a normal routine wherever they are. And so wherever God's called us to participate with him, it's going to entail a lot of finding satisfaction in Jesus and utter dependence on him for anything of eternal value.
That's what's frustrating to me about, certain pastors who, you need to get out of your ordinary all the time. Nothing should be ordinary, never have a routine. Well, I gotta poop sometimes. Every day even.
Welcome to the Westminster
like
we talk about bowel movements.
Yeah, John Piper talks about drinking orange juice to the glory of God. Just extrapolate that to literally everything else that you have to do in a day.
Yeah.
Eating breakfast, taking out the trash to the glory of God, letting out the dogs, whatever. And all of that should be God-glorifying kingdom work, not just, let me go on this trip.
Right. Yeah, I applaud the likes of Mary Ellen in her just calling us to look to have satisfaction in Jesus, and not in what we're doing per se. So I think I had a thought, but I lost it.
Where can people find Back-to-Back Ministries?
Back-to-back.org. The word back spelled out, the number 2, followed by the word back again, .org. And it's a fantastic organization with the right heart. I got to, I flew out to, their headquarters is in Cincinnati, and I think this was a year and a half ago. I flew out with Jeff to their annual meeting and got to hear the founders and directors speak, and just to hear like firsthand, it's a husband and wife team, and hear the story of how this got started. I mean, we're talking about I don't know, 10, 15, $20 million organization now that has missionaries all over the world, sites all over the world, but it started so organically.
Right.
But to hear them talk about that they are not an organization that's focused primarily on humanitarian charitable efforts, but they are focused on promoting the gospel in and through what we might say are these ordinary means of building relationships and helping to raise children and helping to they have this program called Strong Families, where they literally want to strengthen the households so that parents in these third world places don't drop their kids off at children's homes because they financially can't afford it.
Right.
So it's just it's a great organization. I encourage you to consider supporting and praying for them. And if you want to know more, reach out to us.
And we don't endorse organizations just flippantly here. Like me being a deacon, we divvy out funds for different groups that we support. And there have been groups that we looked at and said, not saying they're not in the kingdom, but their values don't necessarily line up with what we're trying to promote. And so when we endorse somebody, we've done our homework, we vetted them. Like Back-to-Back is legit.
We've been in relationship and partnership with them, doing trips for 10 years.
Yep.
And it's that partnership and relationship continues to grow stronger. And so yeah, I would definitely endorse that.
Absolutely. Well, go love God, love your neighbor, makes music. See you next time.